If you have any questions, just go to the front, and then we'll pass you the mic. And if any of the guys, Rick, you can come up, and then we can answer the questions. Does anyone have questions?
Bless you. So, Praful and Rick, I don't know if it's useful or not, but Honda just launched a Honda Ventures Innovation Lab in California, and they're looking to collaborate with a lot of technologists all over the country in coming up with new ways to take, automobile technologies to the next level. And if that's interesting or helpful as maybe a sponsor for a vehicle or maybe some technology to go along with that, let me know. We can put you in touch with, Honda Innovation Ventures.
Yeah. All right. So that would be really helpful. It would be great to get a car from Honda, and also the ability to just work with their engineers and talk to their car and be able to actuate it, which is what Tyler was speaking about before. Because once you get to that level, then we can just program the car, and we'd have much easier time to work on it. Plus, it's a great marketing thing for them.
Right, and the other one is it Chrysler out of Detroit? The designer for I don't know, Nick. What was the SRT is someone that I can also put you in touch with and see if they're helpful at all.
Cool. And that's actually the value of Juice Tank right there. So if you guys are on the fence about working here, you should definitely try to do that. Does anyone have any questions? Yep.
Thanks. So the question I had, I saw, I'm non-technical, but apart from being able to 3D print, but which may be useful. But one of the things of the teams you had, we had software, engineering, art, licensing. Do you have any like a business team or something for funding sponsorships and that type of thing, or do you see that as part of the core team?
That's part of the core team, and absolutely, if you're interested in doing that, the core team is all about helping all the teams out together. So if there are issues with funding, sponsorship, getting logos or whatever that is, we need a core team working on it, because everyone working on their own independent thing could lead to disaster. And if yes, essentially, like project management is. So the question was, does the core team have project management? I don't think this is like more of like a project management like thing. It's just that we want to be able to hit deadlines and timelines, and if we have a core team working on all of the different parts, then we can hit them more easily, and we know it's deterministic rather than trying to see when the community will be able to do stuff. But the community is most helpful in solving the hairy, big problems that the core team is there's going to be a variety of things, but we definitely need support from the community. That was a good question. Is everyone just tired?
Such as doing like a driving aid. So for example, using the sensors to create a sort of mini map for the driver so they can sort of see around what kind of cars are around them. Would that be a viable sort of step to take before having a fully autonomous car?
So the question is there going to be an intermediate step like having a driver aid before going fully autonomous? And Rick, do you have any?
Yeah, well, I think that because we're trying to I have to understand Tyler's system. We have to understand the systems. We have to understand the data that's flowing around. Having something like intermediate steps are really important to identify and make sure that we do take. So I would say that part of the bringing that question up and that sort of thing is to figure out, are those the right steps? But I think that you would want to have some intermediate process to get to where you're going. But I think the other part is if I'm answering the wrong question.
And also, we also have a timeline of when we want to see everything done. we just didn't get it up on the screen, but we'll have it online on the meetup. But essentially, there are intermediate steps, and then the virtual world is one of the more important steps of getting the AI tested. And then when we want to get it into the car, it'll be something like a driver aid. I think that would be the best way of saying it. Where basically the computer will kind of tell where the car could go, given the instructions, and then we could see it in real time in a virtual world and also in a physical world with some kind of projection somewhere to see where we're actually going to go. So that's exactly what we want to do, is move in intermediate steps, but have a lot of effort and energy from the community so we can propel ourselves forward.
Yeah. One of the things that I've run into working on like distributed open source projects is that various people have a certain amount of time, a certain amount of availability. They have skills that they're really able to share, and so if there's like a thing like that fits into those steps, then we have to, it makes sense to take them. Absolutely.
Exactly. And that's kind of what the core team's whole ability is trying to do, is to make sure that the steps taken are going to hit the timeline.
Regarding the virtual world, is there any specific real world topography that you want to simulate in the virtual world where you could test the AI?
Yeah, actually I think that simulating the topography and the road components are all part of that. So we have to so if you're running down the road, you need to know the inclination of it. You need to know certain amounts of information. And I think that this kind of does a very interesting thing. I think we're going to learn a lot of information on the way. For instance, if you know the make and model of a car, and you can know the dimensions of it, and you've identified that the vehicle in front of you is that kind of car, you're able to say, place the three-dimensional version of it, rather than like when we work with a Kinect, you'll see shadows, but those are data shadows, not light shadows. So there are things that we can know, we can put into the world, and those would be what we'd be tracking, and our understanding of what that space would be generated from that. So having more information, like what's the street signs and simulations. So if you're capturing data, you're playing it back, you want the condition of the road that people are on to also match. And additionally, how much information is needed to do a good simulation.
And that's kind of what we...
Well, one thing that, as far as shadows, you know latitude, longitude, you know your time of the day, you can predict exactly what the shadow should be. So you don't have to guess that. You know what it should look like, and you don't predict it.
Mm-hmm. So I think what Tyler's saying too is that you can determine that information, like you can actually, so if you don't have the precise, like say if you're doing you can do LiDAR, which sees through and you can map that three-dimensional space out. There's also extruding the information to make reasonable assumptions. I think that's part of that, but conditions like light and dark are I think in weather conditions, I think these are all things that the technology is good or better at, depending on what technology you're using.
Exactly.
Is there a specific area, geography
that
you are
well, for me,
you want to use as a starting point?
Absolutely. Because of my background putting together the Rutgers campuses and the Rutgers virtual tour type stuff, is I would love to just continue to enhance that project and extend the roads and things of this area in New Brunswick, Somerset, and just build out from where we are. Because if we're going to test vehicles in our neighborhoods, we should be able to build those out. And I think also going to Praful's idea of documentation is that if we do this properly, you would be able to also take that same concept and do your neighborhood. Right? It's something that if we can really package that up and explain it, if we had other people participating, all of that would come into.
So zero ground is Rutgers University and vicinity.
From my point of view.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it's also because I'll be driving from home to Juice Tank every day, so
Okay.
that helps.
There you go.
So.
Get real data where you really are.
Yes. So.
Yes.
So we're going to use real topography and
Okay.
stuff. So we're actually using as real world as possible,
Okay.
but in a virtual environment, so we're safe.
Good. Thanks.
I had a question. I was thinking about this on the way to work today. Is there any are there any like rules or restrictions yet about autonomous driving on the road? Like, can my car just drive itself, not get pulled over?
There are, and so there's 3 states: California, Nevada, and Florida. I don't know why it's Florida, but they're one of the states. New Jersey doesn't have laws, so either way, we're okay. So if it causes controversy, brings more attention to us. If we don't, then we are safe to go. So the whole thing is to go on the highway next year, so we'll see how much noise that creates.
Right.
Oh, that's that one. Sorry.
Most states implicitly
Could you repeat that once again, Tyler? You came off you kind of cut out. Tyler, could you just repeat that once again? Or you just cut out?
Yes. Yeah. The Nevada law actually prohibits autonomous vehicles because it says there have to be people watching and experiencing autonomous vehicle at all times. You're not free to set the car off by itself, go somewhere. And you actually have a because you have to be driving the car at all times. But most states implicitly allow autonomous vehicles.
So did everyone get that? Where basically Nevada doesn't allow it. You need to have 2 people in it always watching the autonomous car, but all other states implicitly allow it. So we're in the implicit state.
Hi. Both comment and question. So my comments are more from being more familiar with WordPress as an open source system. And they have leads for each of the core teams. So in this case, it would be non-tech, software, and engineering. So I imagine you'd want to do something like that. And they have core contributors within each of those. And the question is, do you have or are you envisioning like a regular meeting schedule?
Absolutely.
Do you have that out already, or what's the status of that?
So we are going to have regular meetings. We also have friends from New York City who started a similar meeting as well. So if you couldn't join or you're in New York City, we're actually going to work out something with them tonight so that we can have something in New York City as well for the guys who traveled, and thanks a lot for that. We are going to have regular meetings. We are going to have 3 types of meetings. There's going to be meetups like this where we're just going to explain where we're going, the direction, and what's going to happen. There's going to be like a lecture series where basically someone comes out from who's an expert in something, maybe Sebastian Thrun himself, we'll see, and they'll go through a certain system or process so that if people are uncomfortable or unfamiliar with it, they can learn it very quickly and pick it up. And then the final thing is a hackathon. Basically, like they're just going to be themed. It's going to be about the self-driving vehicle, but to come in, we'll be able to like work on a bunch of stuff together, get a lot of stuff done. But this isn't like project management. Like we're not going to give tasks. It's just you come in with some idea related to a car or hacking a car, and then we'll just be able to get it done because we have all the right people in place.
But having, I think, regularly scheduled meetings once a week, once a month, whatever, for the development of a project helps move it along.
Absolutely, we'll have monthly meetings. Yeah. So that was a good question.
And I'll definitely second that because I work on the ChipKit project, which is an open source PIC32 using the Arduino platform. And we had done bi-weekly meetings. Those worked great. We do monthly meetings. Those work great. But it really it pulls like the people who are working on a regular basis together. Really works.
And it helps you plan. I mean, we all work.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the core team, we're all going to have each other's numbers. So if you're on the core team, know that you will be texted constantly.
So there's a lot of excitement around self-driving cars right now. I'm sure there's other similar efforts to this happening all across the country. Are you guys tuned into what may already be going on? And should we partner with other groups or pay attention to what other groups are doing?
Absolutely. So what's happening is we do want to partner with them. We do want to work with other groups, and there are a lot of efforts. So Tyler's actually plugged into a few things. There's something happening in Princeton, which we just made friends with yesterday, which was exciting. There's stuff happening in University of Washington, and then stuff happening now at Rutgers. So we're pretty tied into those types of programs. Now, if you know of something, and then Mukesh just brought up, Honda. So these are things that we're open to. We don't want to get to a point where there's 5,000 people part of this, but we do want to get where we have strong sponsors and teams. Like we want to have sponsors like Red Bull, Tesla, Toyota, Honda, whoever it is, but they have to be meaningful contributors to the project. They can't just be there. So all of these things we're going to think about, and the core team is actually going to make decisions on that stuff because that's an exceptionally important part of the whole project happening and being successful. But was there anything deeper part of that question that I didn't hit on?
No, I guess my concern was like, are we going to be duplicating the efforts of 50 other groups across the country?
No, but there are no open source projects in this space. There's few. Elcano's one of them, and we're going to be the next one. And so if we're able to get the right type of people and they're interested, we'll absolutely partner with them. But I mean, every car company across the board has something. They just don't talk about it or open source it. So it's like it doesn't really benefit us as our community going forward. But I mean, like for example, we do want to work with Microsoft because the Connect is just really awesome.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say one thing I really like with the Elcano project is that they really boiled it down to a small space vehicle. And one of the things a lot of hackerspaces in the area are doing are these Power Wheels racing, where they hack a Power Wheels and throw in for $500. Your goal is to race an electric vehicle or turn in this kid's toy to an electric vehicle. But now that we've been talking about this, I'd love to take the technology of Elcano and throw it into the Power Wheels and just have it race against everybody. So, just anyway, I just had a great idea.
That would be awesome. Are there any other questions?
How is the dynamic road situation simulated?
So could you elaborate on that? Could you elaborate on that question, and then Rick can take it.
Mm-hmm. So are you just saying so there's the idea that you have data that's being recorded as you drive. So if you are in a real world situation, you have information that was gathered in that particular space, and one of the goals is to replay those situations so that you can say there was a real scenario and figure out what data was collected from that and what it means. So for instance, I was showing the video of the cars being animated around. The idea is that a vehicle you could record what that vehicle had done and then play that vehicle through the road paths that were the real scenarios. So you can re-simulate a moment. You may not have the data on all of the cars, but you have the data on your car. So that's one step of the simulation.
Okay, and I have another question. So currently, our job is mostly on the software side, right?
Yeah, there's the hardware that needs to grab the data, and I'm sort of simplifying that problem, but it's actually CAN bus data
by simulation
and all that. But I want to take that data and then use that for the simulation. So once we have it, we can then simulate simulate as much as we can about the car that makes sense for self-driving vehicles.
And then also there are three distinct groups, right? There's the engineering side that Tyler's really responsible for, but here what Rick and I are really, really working on is a software and the data analysis part of this whole puzzle. And then there's the other side of marketing, sponsorship, fundraising, and all of that stuff that we do need to work on.
Yeah, and actually you just reminded me of another key component, which is if you look at a lot of the things going on in the 3D printer space, I have friends who have made 3D printers, and then they were like, cool, I made a 3D printer, this is awesome. But they didn't really use it. And then there's the other group that are like, man, I love 3D printing, and they got one that was like fully operational, and they just 3D print all the time. So what I'm making an analogy to is there's building your autonomous vehicle and going, wow, I have this autonomous vehicle. Now, okay, but we want to get to that stage later on where it's, okay, now we have the AI in the simulation. So that's, I think, is like, if we can do the AI in a simulation and tie that back into what Tyler's doing, then we actually have the two types of development working together with each other. So the people who want to see what simulation will do for them can start seeing what simulation will do. And the people who want to build the car and see what it's, like, wow, this is awesome, then that would be their role. The team should be big enough to do both.
Exactly.
Hi, I have 3 questions here. So, as you mentioned earlier, you would like the community involved to help contribute to this project, and also you have the core team there. So my question is, if I'm not a part of the core team, I don't have that much time, but I also want to contribute, how much time would you expect, like, an individual to spend on this project? Like, what's the minimum amount of time, let's say each week or each month, I need to spend on this time in order to really get, I guess, being helpful? So that's the first question.
So only expectations from the core team. That's the only time we expect time frame. We expect deadlines and stuff like that because they're contributing their core and they're going to see that the deadlines are hit. Apart from that, as much time as you can provide and benefit from, that's what we're looking for. We want the community to be. It's not an obligation. It's not a job. But if you are part of the core team, is when there's an obligation.
Okay. So my second question is, so if I understand correctly, this project now is pretty much like an open source project, right? Where all the codes or anything like programs can be viewed online. Is that correct? Or it's not? Like eventually, what I'm trying to understand, how do you foresee this project will go eventually? Let's say next year it's become super successful. Are you going to, I guess, patent it and commercialize the project, or what's the plan there?
This project will perpetually be open source. It'll always be there for the community. The community's here to build it out, and we're here to support the community. We have business models around how we're going to sustain the operation and then get it into the hands of a lot of people and allow companies to benefit from it. But right now, everything's going to be open source, and when you're part of the core team, we can talk about it. I can even talk about it now. It's not a secret. We'll have a meetup about how we're looking to make a business model around it. But right now, that's not the point of this conversation. So if you are interested, you can come see me and we can talk about it. But the business we have a business model in place.
Okay, great. The third question. You have shared a lot of resources there on your slides. Is there like a place or like website where we can see them in case let's say, I guess some of us didn't take the notes?
So all of the slides, videos, and the live stream, you guys have recorded the live stream, right? All of that stuff is going to be on the meetup page.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Cool. Pass it on. So him and then.
Hello. Okay. I'm slightly technical and more project management. So one, of course, you guys talked about some project management and whom do I talk to get some feel for what you guys are doing and perhaps contribute if needed. Do I talk to you or do I wait for the next meetup? How does that work?
So and it all depends on the team that they're contributing to. I mean, Rick.
I mean, Praful, you're the guy.
Yeah. So
and I'm sort of I'm playing a sort of support, but I have open source product through Rutgers that matches into the environment. So things that cross into my area, I'm totally willing to answer and talk about. But I mean, Praful has really put this together.
So I mean, that was just what I was wanting to clarify, is that all of the requests are going to come to me and my team, okay. And then any questions or any support we need, we'll go out to Tyler and Rick as well. But all of the conversations and all that stuff, the easiest way to have one person handling all that stuff, and then we can bring in the appropriate people to time. And I mean, all of these guys are here because they want to help out, but having like 100 inbound requests is probably going to get tough for them.
Right.
So we're going to be handling that.
So I can email you and perhaps
I'll put up
get a
my
feel for
contact information on as well.
whom to talk. Second question, and if I may, that's the interface between the car or rather the simulation tool that you have, is that similar to the real world cars that you will be eventually putting the thing on by wire, drive by wire? Is the interface or the interface?
Well, okay. So, for instance, if you thinking about the vehicle, you have to think about what data you can get from it. So, if you're actually using like Profil's, vehicle, there's a certain amount of data I can get from that. If I actually use the Power Wheels, there's zero data. Everything that goes on that is something that I have to put there. So, if I put GPS on it, if I put wheel encoders that say that they rotating a certain amount and that we have a speed and measuring the battery or whatever you can put on a thing, if it doesn't have the sensor, you have to figure out is it important for the self-driving vehicle to have that info. If it is, then you want to make sure you capture it so that the vehicle can be driven. So I think for me, it's trying to figure that out so that when I do simulation, I'm not simulating unnecessary parts of the world.
Right.
So I don't think I have an answer exactly for that. I just think that that's a general problem that you have to keep working at depending on the devices and the environments.
And I haven't done the course yet. I plan to, but the simulated cars that you showed, the inputs that you give the
Yeah. So one of the things would be
How
develop the
those-
car model a lot more sophisticated than the default car models that we're using in that simulation. We have to the vehicles that we use have to be evolved. So that's actually the model of the 3D vehicle has, what does it do for its driving algorithm, but real life has some other data that you want to know, like, what's the CAN bus will tell you things like what's going on in the engine, right? So sometimes knowing that might help you drive, but might not help you drive. Like if your car's going to break down, it might be a good idea to know that that's an early warning sign. So in a real car with that information, you might know some diagnostic data. Actually, you will definitely know diagnostic data. But other vehicles, you might not get to that piece of info. So you'd have to then say, is it important to simulate that part for driving too? I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Did that answer your question? Pass it behind.
I have a question from software perspective. If you see there's going to be a lot of data crunching happening, so for running a simulation or running any algorithm, what kind of a CPU infrastructure are we going to have? The thing is, if we are contributing that our laptop is not going to be good enough for these purposes.
So I'm going to answer that first. Right now, we'll try to operate data on our laptops. When we realize that there's not enough, we have resources available from almost every cloud provider, and we can access more if we need to. So as a community, what we need to do is decide what the resources we need are, and if there's we need 100 computer cluster, we can put that together pretty quickly and then start crunching data. But we would have to figure out a model, an algorithm, and a model, but try to do it on a small scale first. Operate on your laptop just to see if you can get that something operational, and then we'll put it out to the whole cloud.
And another question is, I see this project as a little different from everyday projects. The thing is, you have different kind of dependencies within the software development itself. How you're going to resolve these dependencies? Because I can be working on some component of the system, and someone else might be depending on my component. So how we are going to resolve all these kind of dependencies?
Okay. Did you have a comment on the first question?
I think I'm okay on the first one. I think I'll just. But Tyler's the one who actually has the.
Yeah, I have one question.
Could you repeat the first question?
What top with the data collection idea is that if you grab data from you've got data on the particular project, take the footprint forest. If you use that in the simulation, you alter the
you just repeat what he said?
Yeah, okay, so one of the things is to say, let's say you've collected data on a vehicle, you have a vehicle that's replaying a particular route. As soon as you start changing speeds or introducing, say, bumps or something else that's not collected in that actual simulation, you're now changing it, and whether or not it's accurate as a moment becomes an issue. So basically, if you put speed bumps in a road and you were replaying something, the vehicle would run through those speed bumps. Now, if you did a physics simulation, they'd hit it, they'd do something, but the next action may not be lined up appropriate for what the algorithm had done in the car itself, or at least the decision point. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you have a car, if you change the car, that becomes invalid. It will be statistically normal, but it's not going to be ultimate.
Okay. So then that, okay, so then the other part is replayability. If you change speed is one of his examples. The calculations are actually different at different speeds. So you can't, what is it? You're not slowing down the time of the world, you're slowing down the time of the car, and then the calculations change. So I think there's a sort of there's something invalidating, what is it? It seems there's a lot of test conditions that you have to pay attention to, and it would be like, is it a valid test is an absolutely critical component of understanding what you're testing. That seems to be part of that conversation.
And then on to your second question. Actually, the way we're going to resolve dependencies is that everything's on GitHub, everything's open source. If you're working on something that's crazy, you put a new branch. If you don't know how to do these things, Rick actually has a book coming out.
Oh yeah, I just just tossed out. No, I actually really worked on a book called Pro Arduino, and so one of the chapters that I put together was how to use GitHub in hardware software development, and it takes you through the process of bug management, the whole thing. So that's one of the areas that I really I'm passionate about, is helping people understand that process and work together on open source projects. So it's something that I can advise on, but mostly as a group, if we have shared rule sets, we're good.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll be able to resolve these things quickly. So don't worry about your changes getting lost or anything. We have a pretty good system in place, and then we'll have a community that can operate on these things.
But it's the part too that everybody's in this community. They're all interacting on these parts, and sometimes you do have to wait for somebody to do something. It's it's whether or not, like, if you're saying as a developer, hey, I'm going to try to get this done, everybody understands you're trying to get that done. So it's the conversation, it's the community, it's those monthly meetings, it's the ability to escalate something if there is an issue, but it's part of that communication. That's got to be very healthy. So people will get deadlocked, but there are ways around it. We have to not let people stay deadlocked.
And then the core team is going to be responsible for, if someone can't get something done, we can find another way around it.
I'm just going to have an extension to the gentleman's question. Are you simulating the actual sensors in terms of video cameras and proximity sensors and light sensors? Has there any work has been done on that?
Well, right now, I basically outlined the vision of how this would hook together. I have done what I was doing with that data collection with the different devices. Those things could be done. Students of mine, 3 semesters, did a mini smart house and did data simulation based off of turning lights off and on for a mini home. I mean, basically, there are certain activities you can grab the information from and simulate if you need to simulate it. It's providing the right context for that to happen. So if we're introducing new information virtually, then the algorithms you create are going to have to be able to respond or understand what's going on or know that it's important. But then you can have virtual, like in real life, lights change. So like if you're at a stoplight, the light's going to change for that. If we simulate that virtually, well, not if, but that would have to be simulated. If we were going to say, is this AI good at something? All of those things have to be there.
Well, actually simulating the input into the sensors, because ultimately you're going to be...
Oh,
You see what I'm
okay. So yeah, you can actually simulate sensors themselves, and if you're depending on the type of testing you're doing, you can actually do replayability of data of those sensors. But if you're going to say I have to find out if my software is working by saying I have a value that's true or false, I need to set up those conditions and test it, and then I have to say, I have to, there's a level of testing that I think
I mean,
that's at least talking to.
Simulating this input into the sensors within the context of the virtual world.
Mhm.
Because ultimately the virtual world is not, it's nice because you can have the car driving around, but ultimately in order for you to translate that knowledge into a self-driving car on the road, you need to simulate the input into the sensors because the sensors on the road will be having those types of inputs. So in order for you to play that.
I would call that developing the way the world works and the way the vehicle responds to elements that are in the world. You would have to simulate what it is happening in a car if needed. Like that's the problem. Like you could simulate, like for instance, you would know, for instance, if the dome light was on, if you're using CAN bus. And so if there was a light sensor that was sensing light, in the game engine you might want to know, does my light sensor say that the light came on? But sometimes yes, you have to develop the model. So the model isn't just external or you're just running through the physics engine. You do have to have an interaction component so that when events occur, doors open, like we have students who get on buses. All of those things have to have some analog that's meaningful. And I think that's the challenge, is creating the right meaningful analog that you can simulate.
And if anyone has more questions, we'll just take it offline because this is getting really technical.
But, yeah.
One last quick one. You mentioned you have a book that has the, the GitHub and all that. Would we need to buy that book in order to?
Well, it's in production, so it's coming out shortly. But yeah, so I have some alpha copies of the book, sort of. But I also can put people into resources. Like mine is definitely, you've never used GitHub before and you want to get started. So I think it fits a lot of just getting going. But I also have written the documentation for the Arduino team about some of the software management pieces. And then for the ChipKit team, I also, how to build the software, run the software, I document that too. So I do have materials out there that I can point to, but there's a big world of resources, and I can always point anyone here to the problem you have and the right resource for it.
And I think we'll take a few more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Like 2 more questions.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, do you have a simple roadmap or plan, like talking in layman terms, like how are you going about doing this?
Yes, I'll get it up on the meetup page.
Simple white paper, blue paper, whatever you call, like
yes.
Or the pieces of the puzzles. Identify what's there and what's missing.
Yes.
I mean, why is the GPS a bad thing to use? Like simple stuff like that. Why did you come up? Like, what is our method going to be?
Okay, so we'll get that up on the meetup page latest by the end of next week, but we'll try to get it by the end of the weekend, and everyone can see what we're talking about in the schedule and why we're making the decisions we're making.
I would also say that the conversations we have directly after, we can talk about those things in more detail, and in fact, that's probably our most productive moment, is after we finish off this segment.
Exactly. That's a really good point. There was one more question out there. Let's get them to...
Are you going to have requirements, some kind of a base requirements before you start the project? In other words, what minimum you have to achieve?
So requirements in terms of technical requirements, or
just a business requirements, what you are trying to do.
So yes, so we're going to put all of that stuff also up on the meetup page as well. So along with the layman terms and where we're trying to go and how are we trying to think about these things, we'll try to do it as logically as possible. And so yes, those are all there. We just have to put it out in layman's terms. We try to present as much stuff today as possible, but there was a lot of details that we glossed over. So. So I would like to just thank the speakers, Rick and Tyler, for coming out today on this day. Again, wanted to thank Juice Tank for giving or providing us a space in the venue. And again, tomorrow is a free day, so definitely take advantage of that if you're in New Jersey. And yeah, and we'll look forward to talking to you after the end of this, and also Rick's demos in the back. So definitely take advantage and play around with that. Thank you so much for coming out.